This may seem like a no-brainer, but this is for the writers in the audience, or for people who just want to take a peek behind the veil. Every character, no matter what genre or stripe, has something that makes them interesting or worth following. Some have special powers or inherent abilities, some are just lucky, but they usually have something about them that moves the story along. This could be broken down in a couple of different stats, and with a little work, you can transplant that into any character sheet you could want. So it's usually considered a little gauche to think about characters in terms of a stat line, like D&D or Sword World or Fallout or any of the other gaming systems you might like to use. But then you have modern isekai shows that seem focused on showing off their stats for reasons that elude me. But the stats that appear in anime aren't offering what stats could actually be behind the scenes, at least not in the sense of what we're going to be able to talk about. So toss that sort of minutia away when we're thinking about this, because we're going to talk about way broader ideas than chance to hit with large brick versus small brick or whatever it is. Broadly speaking, stats in this sense fall into a couple of different categories: body, mind, and special. Special covers stuff like luck, magic, psionics, or whatever sort of things that you can't really track to an easy stat. If you're going to be writing a character, you should know what these characters' stats are, roughly. Additionally, the stats should be fairly balanced out. Now, that's the problem with characters who seem to be good at nothing or good at everything. They don't really seem to have any specific foibles. A character who has everything, unless in the hands of a clever writer, is a character who is nothing. So what's the point of all this? Well, how a character's stats shake out has an effect on the story. Take Slayers, for example. Lena Inverse is a sorceress, a fairly high level one, so her higher stats are mind-based, specifically charisma and intelligence. She fights with a short sword, though that's not something that she needs to be very strong to fight with, and she's not particularly durable. However, the story she's in rewards strong magic users and smart characters. This is why Gowry, who's a fighter, is fairly useless in the big battles in those series. Likewise, Amelia is a very low intelligence character, but still a strong spellcaster who traded in intelligence for extra charisma and constitution. This makes her very durable, but extremely unbearable, but that's a consequence of the story. The story is designed for Lena and characters like her to be able to use their abilities to the fullest and be challenged even in the skills they're strong in. This is compelling because these characters are near the top, if not at the top of their field, and yet they are still under the gun in spite of their talents. This is similar to why people watch sports anime. It's just that we usually see the training that leads up to the primary conflict as a sort of proof of skill sort of thing. Generally speaking, your characters should have an affinity for one sort of stat and be lacking in others. For example, Goku is extremely strong and durable, but he's also extremely stupid. This leads to things that can carry a show along infinitely, because if a character like him has low mental stats, that means opponents on his level with better mental stats will be able to get the drop on him very easily. If they can't outfight him, they can outthink him. Which means that he has to come up with some clever tricks, or in some cases, complete horse shit, to still win at the end of the show. Most real-style mecha pilots lend themselves to more mental stats than physical as well, given the necessity for hand-eye coordination and split-second decision-making. This is more often wisdom than intelligence unless they're mechanics. This leads to more tension when they have to make field repairs, for example, or when they have to make some sort of choice about the philosophical reasons that they're fighting. It's not that the character is stupid, mind, but that they're unprepared for that sort of mental attack. Likewise, when they're attacked outside of their mech, they've got to rely on stats and skills they may not be good with, because it's very rare that the characters that we follow in real robot shows are actually trained soldiers. This is another way to build tension in the series. When a character is faced with a challenge they excel at without much effort, it lacks any tension and becomes more of a chore. When a character is faced with a challenge from someone who is also at the top of their game, or even better than them, they become the underdog, and that becomes engaging, at least to Western audiences. Conversely, another way to build engagement is to make a threat that a character can't really stand up to with their own skill set. For example, Pris from Bubblegum Crisis is a great physical character. She's got the skills that make the most out of her hard suit, but her skills aren't able to handle the entire Genom Corporation and the boomer plague that keeps creating robot monsters. The story is then how she handles the threats that she can defeat, how her team opposes Genom with their own skills, and a race against a grinding battle of attrition. Does all this make sense? Does this seem super obvious to you? Well, what happens when a character has no real skills, kind of like your typical isekai character? Ideally, then, the story that people would find compelling would involve a character growing into what is essentially a stat block that they like. But that's only doable once or twice before that gets overplayed. So we have characters who have nothing compelling to them, or they're surrounded by waifus that make up for his lack of skill set with their own. But then those characters simply become a deployable skill set with a big set of cans, and that's not really a character either. I guess what I'm getting at here is that you should be having conversations with your characters. Even if it's not literal, you should be looking at your characters and asking, what the hell do you do well? Why should people care about what you can do? How does what you do affect the story? If the answer is nothing, maybe scrap it and try a new one. If your character doesn't have anything special about them, why would anybody watch or read a story about them? Show me a character that matters, that has some ability to affect their world. Even Hikaru Genji was a genius for any of his other myriad flaws. So again, what's the point of all this? Well, I feel like a lot of modern authors and anime writers don't really understand their characters in this way, when it seems like such a thing should be mandatory for long-form writing like a TV show or a movie or a book or a manga or an anime. But really, if this encourages anyone out there to re-examine their own work or help put thoughts in order for why a character doesn't jive with them, well, then that's a win in my book. And, it's a good thing that talking out of one's ass isn't a crime, or I'd have a life sentence by now. While I'm on the topic, is there anyone out there who wants to beta read a novel I wrote? It's got mecha in it! Anyway, that being said, this is Professor Otaku, the greatest American anime critic, signing off.